Discover how a surprising new maid inspired a billionaire son to overcome 10 failed math tests. Ethan Carter's world was a perfectly manicured facade of wealth. Brought up in the affluent suburbs of Dallas, Texas, he was the son of a billionaire tech mogul. But as he sat in his room, grades strewn across the desk like forgotten toys, 10 failed math tests, the pressure mounted. Each felt like a noose tightening around his neck. His father's voice echoed in his mind. Grades are everything, Ethan. You must excel. But what did that really mean? Success was defined by wealth, connections, and status. A life he felt suffocated him. He yearned to break free, but the knowledge of impending college applications only intensified his despair. It was then that Rosa entered his life. The new maid, a hardworking woman from Mexico, brought a sense of raw authenticity that Ethan had known he craved. Watching her bustling around the house, her hands calloused, yet nimble, reminded him of what real struggle looked like. He felt an inexplicable pull toward her, tinged with curiosity. "Hey, Rosa," he started hesitantly one afternoon, "how did you end up here?" The stories spilled from her like a river, detailing her relentless journey. From the sacrifices she made for her family to the dreams of providing them a better life, each word resonated with Ethan like a forgotten melody. As she spoke, a deep, unsettling pride churned within him, conjugated by feelings of inadequacy. How could he, a billionaire's son, feel lost in a world where Rosa forged her path with sheer determination? With each conversation, Ethan unearthed more about himself. What did success mean to him? The question battered him mercilessly, echoing louder with every passing day. Faced with the dismal reality of his academic failures, he felt cornered, his future prospects eroding. Yet there was something about Rosa's life force that ignited a flicker of hope. She embodied resilience, her spirit unbroken despite the odds stacked against her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Rosa revealed that she had once excelled in math, but never had the resources to pursue it seriously. An idea sparked within Ethan. What if she helped him? With her as his mentor, the concept felt revolutionary. As they delved into equations and formulas, the despair that had weighed him down slowly dissipated. Each session became a blend of learning and unearthing who he was outside the constraints of his lineage. But the deeper he dove into the subject, the harder it became to confront the expectations looming from his family. He wasn't just fighting his self-doubt. He was standing at the precipice of two worlds, one grounded in privilege, the other steeped in struggle. The stakes mounted when the school's annual showcase loomed near. He felt the weight of his family's legacy pressing him down, smothering his newfound passion. Would he take the easy road paved by his father's connections, or would he honor the hard work instilled in him by Rosa? For the first time in his life, he was caught between a facade of success and the painful yet liberating path of personal integrity. Just as he was gathering the courage to confront this dilemma, a shocking revelation threatened to unravel everything he clung to, leaving him reeling. The future ahead was uncertain, but one thing remained clear: Ethan Carter was on the brink of a profound emotional reckoning, one that would demand he confront the very essence of who he truly was. Ethan felt as if he were trapped inside a crystal bubble, far removed from reality, where the pressure of expectations weighed more heavily with each labored breath. The comforting conversations with Rosa had offered him a new lens through which to view his struggles, but now, faced with the impending showcase, that insight twisted into a knot of guilt. How could he claim his place in success when it felt so predicated on someone else's efforts? He stared at the math textbook sprawled open on his desk, pages filled with scribbled notes and meticulous corrections Rosa had made on the margins. With every number, he contrasted vowed determination and looming despair, questioning whether he truly believed in the possibility of overcoming his academic failures. The stakes were higher than ever, not merely for grades, but for defining who he could become outside of his father's empire. "Ethan, are you ready for your session today?" Rosa's voice entered like a gentle tide, pulling him from his reverie. "Yeah, sure." The uncertainty clung to the word, making it feel hollow. He glanced up, catching a glimpse of her genuine smile, the warmth of her encouragement providing a stark contrast to his chaotic thoughts. "We have some important concepts to review." "I believe in you," she said, her confidence unraveling his mental barriers, even if just for a moment. As they worked through problems, each equation became a metaphor for the conflicts swirling inside him. Addition represented connection, multiplication expanded potential, while subtraction hovered like his father's expectations looming ominously over his shoulder. Was he really capable of redefining success, or was he merely playing the role others had carved for him? Their session soon became a dance of ideas and revelations, welcoming a newfound rhythm into his life. He discovered not only how to solve equations, but also how to navigate complex emotions. As Rosa explored various methods to tackle problems, Ethan found himself questioning the rigidity of his own thinking. It dawned on him math wasn't just about numbers. It reflected the nuances of life itself, filled with curves, setbacks, and the occasional breakthrough. In this newly formed atmosphere of inquiry, Ethan dared to articulate his struggles. "Rosa," he hesitated, "what if I'm just not good enough to succeed? What if everything I've been taught about success is all wrong?" With a gentle smile, she replied, "Success isn't about meeting someone else's expectations, Ethan. It's about understanding where you fit in your own narrative, what you define as success. You're on your own journey, and it won't look like anyone else's." Her words struck him like a burst of sunlight through the clouds. It was the first time someone had challenged his preconceived notions, nudging him to peer beyond his inherited legacy. He had been willing to put in the effort for the grades, but now there was a private thrill in redefining his aspirations. Suddenly, the showcase floated at the forefront of his reality, no longer merely a test of rote numbers, but a manifestation of his will. The day of the showcase arrived. Ethan's heart raced, a fervent mix of excitement and anxiety blending into one. He had prepared meticulously, but now, as he stood backstage, the shadows of doubt crept back in. What would happen if he faltered? He took a deep breath, recalled Rosa's words, and steadied himself. He stepped out awash in the bright lights and curious gazes, and in that moment, he couldn't help but feel that this was a crossroads, to either succumb to his past or illuminate his path forward. As he grasped the microphone, the crowd fell silent. Suddenly, everything hinged on a singular decision: would he reveal who he truly was? The moment weighed heavy with the promise of revelation. And as he began to speak, he realized that revealing his journey might shatter expectations, but it could also create something transformative. What lay on the other side of that moment? Would he embrace his authentic self or retreat into a shadow of failure? Ethan's voice quivered at first, but as he spoke, unease morphed into conviction. He shared his struggles, the weight of constant comparisons, and the suffocating expectations that had defined his existence. Each word bore pieces of his soul, a tapestry of vulnerability. For the first time, he stood in front of an audience, revealing the imperfections he had hidden for so long, hoping his honesty would resonate. As he unveiled the intricate layers of his journey where every failure taught him more than success, he noticed a few nodding heads in the crowd. Their understanding felt like a balm against the tumult that had surged within him. Ethan wondered if perhaps he wasn't alone in his doubts. Maybe his narrative was shared by others who felt overshadowed by the accomplishments of those around them. The showcase was not just an academic presentation, it was a declaration of self. He spoke of Rosa's impact on his outlook, how she had challenged him to define success in a way that was personal rather than inherited. With each passing moment, he realized the showcase was no longer just a platform for academic prowess. It was a transformative space that allowed him to redefine his identity outside of his father's empire. As his speech drew to a close, Ethan felt lighter, as if he had released years of pressure in those few minutes. The applause that followed felt less like validation of his academic success, and more like approval of his journey towards self-acceptance. It was thunderous, charging through him with adrenaline and joy, dispelling the shadows of doubt that had lingered. Then a new feeling swept in, rising from the corners of his soul: intrigue. What had he sparked in that audience? As he made his way to the exit, voices around him buzzed with excitement and kinship. He caught snippets of conversation, people reframing their perspectives on their own academic paths, and it dawned on him that his revelation had ignited something deeper. Ethan returned to Rosa, who was waiting amidst the crowd with her proud smile. Her eyes twinkled with warmth and understanding. "You were incredible," she said. "You owned your story, Ethan. That is true success." In that moment, he recognized that speaking publicly had not only showcased his growth, but also positioned him as a beacon for others wrestling with their own expectations. He found purpose in the possibility of amplifying his story, of pushing that energy forward not just for himself, but for others. As the applause faded, Ethan contemplated the aftermath. Did he want to share his narrative further? Could he facilitate workshops for peers grappling with academic pressure? While it was a leap into the unknown, it blossomed with purpose. Each idea unfurled into the next, fueling his determination to carve his own path. He realized that his anxiety had transformed into a new ambition, not just to succeed academically, but to inspire others through his experiences. In a world so focused on accolades, perhaps advocacy for vulnerability was the brand of success he could claim. But before he could indulge further in this newfound excitement, a familiar face caught his attention. His father stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on his face. Ethan's heart sank. He hadn't anticipated this confrontation. Would his father see the same value in Ethan's journey? Or would the old expectations come crashing back in, threatening to snuff out the light he had finally ignited? As he took a step toward the man who had loomed over him for so long, uncertainty pulsed through him. The real test was about to begin. Ethan's breath hitched the moment he locked eyes with his father. The room's noise faded, replaced by a deafening silence in his mind. This was a man who valued accolades, visible successes, and the kind of perfection that Ethan had just rejected in front of an audience. Pain tightened around his chest, nodding with trepidation. Would they revert to old dynamics, or was there a new possibility ahead? "Ethan," his father began, voice low yet edged with authority. "I saw your presentation. Interesting approach." The words hung heavy, a double-edged sword. Was it a compliment or a veiled critique shrouded in skepticism? As he gripped the podium for support, Ethan felt the old pattern urging him to defend himself, to articulate the successes that had often been measured in grades and achievements, but he paused. "I appreciate that," Ethan replied, forcing calm into his tone. "It was liberating to share what I really feel." His father's eyebrows arched. A flicker of something, was it surprise or disappointment, danced across his face. "You realize that this kind of honesty doesn't always translate into success, right?" The word stung, a reminder of the expectations he'd long endured. Yet, underlying that sting was an upward flicker of rebellion. Could revealing his vulnerabilities truly lead to success? That was precisely the risk he was willing to embrace. Resolutely, he pushed forward, determined to reshape the narrative within this confrontation. "I'm not concerned with the kind of success you think is important," Ethan spoke with newfound assurance. "I want to inspire people, to help them embrace their struggles like I've learned to do. Ethan held his breath, watching his father process the words. The tension lingered like an electric charge in the air. But instead of responding with anger or rebuttal, his father shifted, if only slightly. You think this is the path forward? Absolutely, Ethan replied with conviction. I want to help others who feel suffocated by expectations. The door to potential understanding cracked open just a bit. His father's posture softened, but Ethan could sense the lingering skepticism. This moment galvanized the awareness that he wasn't just navigating his own self-discovery. He was challenging a legacy. Even if it means deviating from the family name? His father finally asked, the weight of tradition palpable in his words. Especially because of it, Ethan asserted, feeling a surge internally. I've spent too long in a shadow that's not mine to bear. If I can help others step into their light, isn't that worth more? In that instant, the world around him blurred, narrowing to the single entity standing before him. It wasn't merely about safety and traditional success. It was a confrontation of values. Ethan didn't know what hurt more, the years of expectations weighing down his shoulders, or the fear of rejecting them completely. But embracing this divergence felt refreshing, a path toward authentic existence. His father's eyes narrowed slightly, an analytical lens whirling through his thoughts, but Ethan remained steadfast. Ethan, I want you to understand. Suddenly, the realization that they might never quite see eye to eye loomed. His father would never fully comprehend the value of vulnerability as strength. But instead of retreating in fear, Ethan leaned in, embracing the discomfort, ready to dismantle the pattern of avoidance that had long defined their relationship. Maybe it's time we both redefine what success means to us, he suggested, feeling the weight of this new perspective. An unsettling patience gripped him. What if this was the first step in opening dialogue? As he turned to leave, uncertainty remained. Would his father allow their paths to diverge? Or would he remain steadfast in his own rigid beliefs? Ethan found himself wondering if stepping into this new realm would mark a separation, or the beginning of something unforeseen within them both. He cherished the idea of forging a path for others, but remained painfully aware that he was still grappling with his own revelations. Then, just as he reached the door, a thought pricked his consciousness, a new concern. What if he wasn't the only one struggling to break free? What if there were others waiting for a voice, a nudge toward their own revelations? As he glanced back, ready for any further exchange, uncertainty morphed into anticipation. In that moment, one conviction crystallized. The journey of redefining success was only beginning, and perhaps the responsibility of lighting the way for others had just fell firmly into his hands. What awaited Ethan next would challenge everything he ever assumed about himself and those he longed to inspire. The opportunity for change was brewing, but would he have the courage to seize it? As Ethan stepped outside, the weight of the conversation with his father lingered like fog clinging to the ground. The cool air was a sharp contrast to the heat of his internal conflict. He breathed it in deeply, trying to clear his mind. Was it truly liberating to be honest? Or just another way to mask the fear of failure that had resided in him for so long? As he walked through the empty corridors of the building, he replayed the events over and over. Each word his father had said felt like a puzzle piece that he had not yet fit into its rightful place. What did it mean to redefine success? What would it look like in practical terms? His thoughts were interrupted by a gentle voice calling from the end of the hallway. "Excuse me, sir?" Ethan turned to find a young woman in a modest yet neatly pressed uniform standing before him. Her name tag read Lily. There was a worn yet determined look in her eyes. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I noticed you earlier. Your presentation was very touching." He appreciated her kindness, but it struck him as unusual. "Thank you, but I'm not sure how many felt that way," he replied, an automatic defense mechanism kicking in, a reflex from years of internalizing the harsh critiques. Lily stepped a bit closer, a warmth emanating from her that contrasted sharply with the sterile, corporate environment surrounding them. Sometimes it takes courage to be honest. People feel that. It resonates. You may not realize how much you've inspired others. Her words knocked the wind out of him. That's what he wanted, to help others embrace their truth. I want to help people connecting with their struggles too, he admitted, feeling emboldened for a moment. But I still don't know if it's enough. I've failed so many times, especially in my studies. She nodded knowingly. I understand failures. My family has struggled a lot. At one point, I didn't think I'd even finish school. But I learned that failure often teaches us lessons we need the most. It's essential, you know. Ethan raised an eyebrow, waiting to see where she was going with this. How did you overcome that? I had great teachers who believed in me even when I didn't. They inspired me to believe in myself, she said, her voice sincere. Their support changed everything for me. And now, as I work here, I try to do the same for others. Her determination lit something inside him. Maybe I need to start doing the same, instead of waiting for permission to explore my potential, he murmured, realizing that they were both learning from their respective challenges, just at different stages in life. Exactly, she affirmed, her eyes sparkling. You're allowed to redefine success on your own terms. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to consider the multitude of possibilities that lay ahead. He could define what it was to inspire, to educate, and to overcome. He could even help others like himself, who seemed trapped under the weight of their own expectations. But what if I fail again? What if I can't make a difference? He questioned, a familiar fear rising to the surface. Lily paused, a knowing smile gracing her lips. What if, instead of focusing on the fear of failing, you focused on the potential to succeed? You never know who might be waiting for you to take that step. As he absorbed her words, a wave of resolve swelled within him. She had struck a chord. Failure could be reframed as a step toward growth, not a dead end. Thank you, Lily. You've given me something to think about, he said, more grateful than he realized. He stepped away, armed with a newfound sense of determination. The internal storm still raged, but cracks were forming in the familiar structure of doubt that had long held him captive. He couldn't let himself be confined by fear any longer. As he turned to leave, a thought emerged, sparking again that buzzing excitement. Could he create a space for vulnerability and strength in the same conversation? Perhaps the next step was not merely accepting his past, but embracing it fully to empower those around him. Maybe the canvas of possibilities had just begun to unfold, and not just for him. There was a world out there waiting for illumination. But what would it take to step forward and ignite that change? Ethan's pulse quickened at the potential for growth, both his own and that of the people he might touch. And then it hit him, a bold idea that could set everything in motion. The moment had come to face the next step of this transformative journey. Would he be ready to confront the lingering doubts or embrace the brutal possibilities of what lay ahead? Ethan stepped outside into the brisk evening air, his mind swirling with possibilities. The encounter with Lily had awakened something deep within him. It was as if the shadows of doubt that had been his relentless companions were now dimming, just enough for a flicker of determination to break through. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the sky, he knew he had to act on the epiphany she inspired. He wandered to a nearby park, the quiet environment offering a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. Sitting on a weathered bench, he allowed himself to process the conversation he'd had with Lily. Why had her words resonated with him so profoundly? Was it her belief in him, her unwavering faith that someone could rise from failure with resilience? Perhaps it was the realization that he wasn't alone in this struggle. Many faced hurdles that felt insurmountable, yet here they were, striving to overcome them. Ethan pulled out his phone and began to jot down ideas. He envisioned creating a workshop or a support group and initiative where people could share their failures and triumphs without fear of ridicule. He envisioned a space where vulnerability was welcomed, and strength was gleaned from that vulnerability. The thought ignited a fire within him. Was it possible that he could be the catalyst for change in others' lives? But rational thought interjected. He paused, fingers hovering over the screen. Wasn't he himself still a work in progress? Who was he to guide anyone when he felt lost amidst his own failures? The thought of claiming such authority over public struggle sent a shiver down his spine. Would he be merely pretending to have everything figured out when he didn't? As he sat, grappling with those conflicting thoughts, a group of teenagers nearby caught his attention. They were animatedly discussing an upcoming project, and even from a distance, Ethan could sense their excitement. Their laughter was infectious. They blended creativity with raw energy, seemingly unburdened by the fear of failure. Watching them, Ethan felt a pang of longing, igniting the initial spark that had faded over the years. How had he lost his ability to approach challenges with such naive enthusiasm? He leaned forward, his mind racing. If he could revive that passion within himself, could he also instill it in others? The possibility sent ripples of excitement through him. Instead of viewing his failures as a crutch, maybe he could brand them into stepping stones for both himself and others. A risk remained: what if no one showed up to his initiative? Or worse, what if his own past failures overshadowed any effort he might make? Yet, the looming fear of inadequacy no longer felt paralyzing. Instead, it became a guiding compass, prompting him to confront his insecurities head-on. Taking a deep breath, he resolved to seize the moment. He would prepare a presentation about failure, not just his academic struggles, but also the lessons embedded within them. Real stories of setbacks transformed into triumphs could resonate deeply, offering tangible hope. He pictured Lily's encouraging smile, a reminder that every journey began with a brave step forward. Ethan opened his notes app again, this time with a renewed sense of purpose. He dashed off, workshop idea, embracing failure for personal growth. But as he typed, a daunting realization settled in. Once he took this step, there was no turning back. He would have to share his failures, and confront the raw parts of himself he wanted to bury. Feeling the weight of that commitment, he wondered if he was truly ready to reveal such depth. What would it mean to peel back the layers he had built over time? And how would he handle the inevitable pushback from his own insecurities? Ethan stood up, stretching his legs as adrenaline coursed through him. There was no more time to hide. The moment had come to take action and embrace the uncertainty that lay ahead. With one final glance at the horizon, he turned to head home, his heart racing with a blend of excitement and trepidation. He had made a decision. Now it was time to face the challenge of executing it. But just as a hint of certainty seeped into his mind, a nagging doubt crept back in. How would he gather enough courage to open up in front of others about his fears? The unpredictable turns of this journey were only beginning. Ethan awoke the next morning with a fire in his gut, yet the prospect of facing his insecurities loomed ominously. He had an idea, yes, but the logistics of bringing it to fruition felt insurmountable. He was now tasked with turning a flicker of determination into tangible action. As he prepared for the day, the simple act of getting out of bed became an exercise in willpower. His mind replayed Lily's words, encouraging him to embrace failure rather than shun it. "Why should I be afraid to speak of my failures?" he mused, staring at his reflection. The vulnerability she had demonstrated had sparked a turning point he had needed for so long. Determined not to let doubt stifle him, Ethan listed out his next steps. First, he needed a venue. The community center down the street hosted classes for various activities, and could be the perfect fit. He envisioned the room filled with faces, some eager, some skeptical, shifting in their seats when he walked in to share his story. The image had a visceral quality that made his heart race. Yet, The bubbling excitement was punctured by the worry that darted through his mind, whispering that no one would want to hear him speak. What if he arrived to an empty room? That thought lingered, making him hesitate at the door. After all, nothing haunted him more than the specter of failure, which always seemed to echo louder in moments of potential triumph. He shook off the worry and walked to the community center, each step falling with greater confidence. Upon entering, Ethan was greeted by the warmth of the staff and the comforting buzz of a working space. He approached the coordinator, a woman named Karen, who listened intently as he described his ideas for a workshop focused on embracing failure. "What a unique approach," she said, her eyes glinting with interest. "We normally focus on success here, so breaking down that stigma could really resonate." Her encouragement infused him with renewed vigor. Exchanging ideas, Karen helped outline what a first session could look like. "I think it's essential to include exercises where people can voice their mistakes and learn from one another," she suggested. It struck him then. The more he spoke about vulnerability, the more it transformed from a personal burden into shared knowledge. Given the right environment, there is strength in sharing struggles, he thought. As they discussed logistics, Ethan found himself growing bolder. He proposed that each participant give a brief testimony about a failure in their lives, setting the tone for a supportive space that made room for laughter and reflection. Karen nodded in approval, and even suggested they promote the session on social media, reaching out to local schools and community forums. The prospect of sharing his own story pushed a weighty thought to the forefront of Ethan's mind. How could he publicly discuss his academic failures while still uncertain about the lessons he had gleaned from them? Would people even care? The creeping shadow of inadequacy whispered back. Even now, on the way home, Ethan pondered the question further. The worst part of his failures wasn't the consequence of falling short, but the weight of silence that accompanied them. Believing no one would understand resulted in his spiraling isolation. If he could confront his own failures, perhaps he could help others do the same. The idea of mutual support began to solidify into something tangible. After reaching home, he sat down and began to type his story into an outline. Each word flowed easily, an unexpected release of pent-up vulnerability that tinged his thoughts with clarity. As he detailed a particularly embarrassing math exam that had devastated him, the act was liberating, a cathartic release he hadn't anticipated. With each sentence, an awareness emerged. His experiences could encourage others to embrace their missteps rather than shy away from them. By embracing vulnerability, he was not just creating a workshop, he was rediscovering himself. But then, just as determination settled in, self-doubt reared its head again. With a new resolve to share those calculated risks, he began to question if he was truly equipped to lead this initiative. He still felt like an amateur in this pursuit of personal development. A fleeting thought interrupted his flow. The first few days of the workshop would be just as difficult for him as it would be for the attendees. It was time to confront those fears head-on. As he finished his draft, Ethan felt a surge of excitement mixed with anxiety. This was the beginning of something new, but little did he know it would come with unforeseen challenges. What would it take to truly open up in the face of fear? Would he falter at the moment of truth, or would the act of sharing liberate him further? The next chapter loomed ahead, and Ethan's journey was just starting to unravel its complexities. Ethan awoke the next day, the sun streaming through his window, illuminating the page on which he had poured out his insecurities and realizations. He had spent hours drafting the outline for his workshop, bravely detailing moments from his life that had once seemed insurmountable. Despite this breakthrough, he felt encumbered by a wave of self-doubt that crashed over him with renewed ferocity. As he sipped his morning coffee, he reflected on the faces in that imaginary workshop. Would they see him as a voice of authority on failure, or merely as someone who stumbled through life? Each sip felt heavier. His insides churned with conflicting emotions. This wasn't just a workshop. This was him baring his soul to strangers. He wondered if they would connect with his stories, or simply regard him as another voice lost in their lives. He shook off the heaviness, standing up resolutely to tackle errands for the workshop. The checklist lay sprawled across his desk: determine the time, finalize the location, promote it, and most dauntingly, prepare himself for feedback, both the positive and the negative. Ethan had never been good at accepting criticism. Throughout his academic journey, he had often internalized feedback as a reflection of his worth, making the prospect of public speaking all the more frightening. He decided to visit a nearby bookstore, looking for inspiration from authors who had effectively transformed failures into strengths. The journey there provided him with a chance to reflect and begin mentally preparing for the session. As he walked, his mind raced with questions about how to frame his narrative in a way that resonated with others. What if he shared a profoundly embarrassing moment, only to find that it only further isolated him? He recalled the moments of vulnerability in his life where he felt unseen. Yet, in those moments, he also found that he could give voice to his experiences. Arriving at the bookstore, Ethan stepped inside, the scent of coffee mingling with the crisp page of books. He wandered the aisles, absorbing the wisdom within the covers of memoirs and self-help guides alike. A book caught his eye: The Gifts of Imperfection, by Brené Brown. He flipped through the pages, and a quote leapt out: "Vulnerability is not weakness. And that myth is profoundly dangerous." As he read on, excitement bubbled within him, igniting the belief that sharing his failures could empower not just himself, but others grappling with similar struggles. He left the store clutching the book tightly, the lessons within it igniting a renewed sense of confidence. The challenge now lay not in avoiding vulnerability, but in embracing it wholeheartedly. He began devising a framework for his workshop that wove in the principles of connection and authenticity. It was time to shift his focus from fear of judgment to the possibility of collective growth. Later that evening, as Ethan planned the promotional post for social media, self-doubt clawed at his mind. What if no one signed up? What if he bombed the workshop? Those familiar worries threatened to drown his excitement. He fought back, reminding himself that this endeavor was as much about learning for him as it was about teaching others. He pressed post and felt a surge of adrenaline course through him. It was out in the world now, a declaration of his intent to engage, inspire, and perhaps to fail spectacularly. Each notification, and like that came through from friends, was a signal of support, yet the most crucial validation still lay ahead. As Ethan prepared to lay his head down that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was waiting just beyond the horizon. Yet, alongside that anticipation flickered the lurking fear of impending vulnerability. Would he truly find the strength to share his narrative? The moment of truth was inching closer, and with it, an urgency to confront not just what it meant to fail, but what it meant to rise after failure. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Tomorrow will be the beginning." But deep down he questioned, would it be empowering? Or would he risk exposing himself further to the ghosts of self-doubt he had long struggled to conquer? The answer remained just out of reach, poised on the edge of the unknown. The morning dawned cooler than the last, a crispness in the air that somehow mirrored the tightness in Ethan's chest. The reality of the workshop was upon him, and today felt charged with an energy he couldn't quite label. The anxiety that gripped him was like an old friend, familiar yet unwelcome. He paced his small apartment, the walls adorned with motivational quotes that felt more decorative than impactful at this moment. "Do it afraid," he muttered to himself, recalling the advice he had read countless times. But now, standing on the precipice of unveiling his deepest fears felt less like bravery and more like reckless abandon. What if he revealed too much? Ethan knew he had to shift gears, transform the self-doubt into preparation. He opened his laptop and pulled up the workshop outline, which cascaded across the screen like a living thing, evolving with each keystroke. He stared at the bullet points detailing the narratives he planned to share. Each one contained snippets of his life, the losses, the failures, moments when hope felt like a distant memory, framing them not as tales of defeat, but rather as stepping stones toward resilience, felt daunting. The unexpected weight of responsibility sat heavy atop his shoulders. Would these personal anecdotes inspire or overwhelm his audience? He took a deep breath, attempting to quell the rising tide of unease. Last night's readings from Brené Brown crept into his thoughts. The power of storytelling, not just to connect, but to heal. He visualized the faces from his imagined workshop, each one likely grappling with their own burdens. Suddenly, the fear morphed into a flicker of determination. This was not merely about him. It was about creating a space where others felt safe to reveal their stories. Determined, Ethan picked a few anecdotes that felt particularly raw: loss of a job, a failed relationship, and that time he froze during a presentation in college, his mind blank in a sea of expectant faces. Each story reminded him that failure wasn't a period, but rather a comma in the narrative of life. He could transform the fear of public speaking into an opportunity for connection. As lunch approached, he decided to break from his frantic work. He headed to a nearby cafe, hoping the bustle of the morning crowd would provide a change of scenery and perhaps some clarity. With a latte in hand, he opened his notebook, sketching out ideas and thoughts that flowed more freely in the lively environment. Then, an unexpected encounter shifted his mindset entirely. A woman across the cafe caught his eye. She seemed engrossed in her own writing, occasionally glancing up with a smile. After a few moments, she approached his table, introducing herself as Maya. They struck up a conversation that quickly turned deep. Ethan found himself sharing the essence of his workshop, sparking an enthusiasm in her eyes. "Oh, vulnerability is powerful," Maya said. "People crave authenticity, especially in this world of polished facades. You're about to give them a rare gift." Her conviction sparked something within him. For the first time, he felt that maybe he wasn't just reliving his failures. He was offering others the chance to see them as part of a shared human experience. With renewed vigor, Ethan returned home, his mind racing with possibilities. This workshop was no longer merely an expression of his own struggles, but a bridge toward understanding and growth for everyone involved. As night closed in, he opened his laptop to prepare the final touches. A sudden thought jolted through him. The moments of shared vulnerability could be what turned strangers into allies. But with the ambition to create connection came the daunting reality of uncertainty. Beneath the excitement, lingering doubts whispered again. What if the audience found his tales trivial? The looming workshop felt precarious, hanging between risk and reward, ultimately emphasizing a truth he had yet to fully embrace. Growth often emerged through the act of exposing oneself to potential failure. He closed his laptop, heart racing. Tomorrow was the day. Yet, a flicker of anxiety reminded him that the journey was as unpredictable as it was essential. Ethan lay in bed, uneasily contemplating the gleam of possibility and fear intertwined. Would he find the confidence to share? Was he prepared for what might manifest in that space of vulnerability? The question echoed, leaving him invigorated yet apprehensive as he drifted into a restless sleep. What awaited him on the other side of the workshop could redefine his view of success and failure, but only if he dared to fully embrace the unknown. Ethan stood in front of the mirror, taking in the reflection staring back at him. It was a simple moment, yet it held the weight of his entire journey. He felt the stirrings of anticipation and anxiety, each emotion curling and unfurling within him. Today was the day he was tasked with leading his first workshop, a step toward sharing not just his academic failures, but also the lessons learned along the way. The familiar tightness in his chest threatened to sidetrack him, but he steadied himself, drawing from the well of courage he had cultivated through his conversations with Rosa, Lily, and even the unexpected support of his father. As he arrived at the community center, he could see the space filling up, warmth radiating through the room as people began to take their seats. Each face represented a different story, a different set of struggles. The moment he stepped through the door transformed the lingering doubts into a tangible, unmistakable energy that charged the air. No longer was he just the hesitant student who had failed 10 math tests. He was becoming a beacon for those yearning to redefine their own narratives. The workshop kicked off with a simple icebreaker, easing into a shared sense of community. Ethan spoke a few words, feeling the connection forged between him and the audience. The tension ebbed away, like the tide receding from the shore, exposing the truths that lay beneath. With every introduction shared, he felt a flicker of recognition. Here were individuals who, like him, bore the weight of expectations yet harbored the hope of transformation. When it was time for him to share his story, he took a breath, listening for the echoes of insecurities that faded into whispers. He recounted his failures, his heart pounding faster with each admission, as a sense of liberation washed over him. This was no longer merely a recounting. It was an exploration of discomfort that bore the seeds of growth. As the workshop unfolded, the environment morphed into a sacred exchange of vulnerability. Attendees shared their own experiences, stories of struggle intermingled with laughter and tears. Ethan became keenly aware of the profound impact his journey had on others, realizing that his purpose transcended personal accolades. He wasn't just guiding them to confront their failures. He was empowering them to embrace their inherent worth regardless of societal definitions of success. In that moment, the transformation within him crystallized. The fear that had once shackled him to silence now propelled him forward, igniting the room with palpable energy. He witnessed connections forming, warmth spreading between people as they recognized their shared humanity. Each story told had the capacity to uplift and validate, sending echoes of encouragement through the room. By the time the workshop concluded, Ethan felt lighter, freer, in a way he hadn't imagined possible. The applause that followed was not rooted in performance. It was a collective acknowledgement of the shared experience they had all navigated together. Recognition washed over him. He had created a space for others to thrive. He received several notes afterward, people expressing how his transparency had inspired them to begin their own journey of exploration. As he stepped out of the community center, he caught sight of a familiar face among the crowd. Rosa stood there, her smile radiating pride and understanding. The emotional weight shifted yet again. He felt anchored in self-acceptance, deserving of the recognition he received. In the days that followed, Ethan harnessed this newfound confidence to further his mission. He organized follow-up workshops, creating a community where vulnerability was celebrated and growth was nurtured. Conversations sparked ideas, and soon, he began collaborating with local schools to reach younger audiences, students grappling with similar struggles. The initiative took root, expanding beyond what he could have envisioned. He felt not just competent but established in a position where he could uplift others. Reflecting on how far he had come brought a deep satisfaction. The boy who once faltered under the weight of FS had transformed into an advocate for resilience. The journey became less about proving himself to his father or society, and more about guiding others toward their own redefinitions of success. In that moment of reflection, Ethan finally understood profound clarity. Success was not a destination, but the broad spectrum of journeys taken along the way, enriched by the lessons learned and bonds forged throughout. This revelation resonated deep within him, fully transforming his perspective. He had conquered more than just tests. He had demonstrated the courage to face failure, to embrace vulnerability, and cultivate hope. Now, as he looked forward to what lay ahead, he felt solid confidence. A marked milestone in transforming from a student into a mentor, evolving from a place of uncertainty to one of genuine fulfillment. This was his moment of triumph. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Let us inspire change together.